Characters. Who are they? What are they? Who will they become? So much goes into the creation of a character. Their backstory, culture, origins, abilities, personality, description, and so much more. As a reader, we only get a glimpse of what truly goes into the development of each character. So sit back and relax as we explore characters in depth on this week's episode of Character Driven with Madilynn Dale. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Character Driven. I have a fantastic author with me tonight to discuss another fun character. So let me bring him in and let him introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Wayne Turmel, and I am normally in Las Vegas, but this morning I am in oh so lovely Indianapolis, supporting the dreaded day job. But it is lovely to see you again, Maddie.
Yes, you too. So before we dive into this character, tell our readers a little bit about the book series that they come from, because I know you've got a new book dropping pretty soon. So
I do. I'm so excited. December 8th, Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker, which is the second in the Johnny Lycan series, the Werewolf PI. And so in the first book, Johnny he's always known he's a werewolf, but he's trying to become a private investigator, and he's got himself a good client, and he's kind of finding his way and all is well. And in the second book, he gets sent to Las Vegas. And of course, how much trouble can one get into in Las Vegas, really? And so he deals with all kinds of things, one of which is a coven of very unique witches, one of whom he falls for harder than he's fallen for anybody in a long time. And that, of course, is Lucretia Jensen, who is known lovingly as Cree.
Mm.
And I love her. I love her. It's very creepy that a 60-year-old guy would love this person so much, but 'tis true.
Nah, I have to say, I kind of fall in love with some of my characters I create too. So I feel like it's a normal thing, honestly, for authors to fall in love with this person they've made, because you mentioned her specifically to match up with your main character.
Yeah, right? Yeah. It's funny when your werewolf is this 30-year. First of all, I have to remember what it's like to be a 30-year-old guy, right? But he's 30, he's single. His Lycanism means he hasn't exactly had stellar relationships. It's a little tricky dating. Yes, it's hard dating out there anyway. It's worse when you're hairy. And then, oh, by the way, there's this killing rage monster. Well, don't laugh at that, because one of the things that makes me crazy, if you read enough urban fantasy and you look at the book covers, even in the shapeshifter books, all the guys are incredibly chiseled and perfectly smooth. And I'm going, what, they wax 27 days a month and they're only allowed to be hairy one? It makes no sense to me. So what kind of woman is going to fall for this not terribly bright, very sweet, obviously tortured, certainly hirsute kind of guy?
Yeah.
And I'll bet I'm the first person to use the word hirsute on this show.
You are, actually, I believe. So, but we're focusing on Cree today, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying not to steer it to all the other characters. I'm not quite through the first book in your series, and it's good. So how does Cree enter into our lives?
Okay, Cree enters our lives because Johnny is sent to retrieve this item from a woman named Carmen Mystere. And Carmen runs, if you've ever been to Vegas and been to the Haunted Museum, she runs essentially a version of that, but she's also a stage magician. So if you think about, she kind of dresses very Elvira. right? Very
Ooh.
goth. She's
Yeah.
all slinky and southern, and she is a witch. She does have legitimate powers, and she's got a coven of very feminist, badass women. And as part of her stage show, there's one woman who is basically a blonde Amazon who is a weapons expert. So she's a sharpshooter and she does all the cool stuff
Yeah.
as part of the stage show. The other part of the stage show is Cree. And poor Cree is not a lot of those things. She is a wannabe witch. She is not very certain in herself, except that she is brilliant with potions.
Ooh.
She refers to herself as a hedge witch with a chemistry degree.
Nice.
And so when Johnny goes to the museum to pick up the device, he meets Cree, and Cree is dressed all badass for the show in kind of bondage gear, but she's just this sweet kid.
Yeah.
And so she's got spiky red hair and a little bit of a crooked tooth, but she's just this wonderful person. And oh, by the way, she's not body perfect because she trains in MMA, which, as
Neat.
Johnny says, she's got legs that could, crack a walnut.
Yeah.
And so I really, really like Cree. And Cree is able to handle Johnny in a way that nobody else has been able to. And if you're reading the first book, you know that he has an ongoing and not terribly healthy relationship with an older woman who he's still involved in that as the second book goes on. And it's not the healthiest relationship, but pretty
Yeah.
port in a storm when, you're Harry Rage Machine.
Yes.
But Cree is a much healthier relationship and has a much better impact on Johnny. And there are things about her that I have stolen from women that I have either observed or known through my life to create this very unique person. And I know it's worked because the women in my writers group universally have a girl crush on Cree.
I can definitely see that. Like, just the way you're describing her, like, I like that she's not that perfect, like, female that you see in a lot of urban fantasy, because not only are the males like one way, so are a lot of the females, and I don't like that. So
yeah, no, she is just as my daughter says, she's just a little badass, and that works.
Yes, I love it. So, and you mentioned too that her skills could kind of grow. Like, what is the relationship? How does that change between her and Johnny Lycan as the story?
Well, when it starts, I mean, she works for Carmen. And so, they kind of meet, and that's cool. But somebody attacks the museum to steal the egg, and there's a fight. And the guys come in with they're kind of Western separatist kind of guys. So they've got big weapons and bad attitudes. And Johnny has to fight them off without going full Lycan.
Oh, gosh.
But the women jump in. I mean, Boudica is a weapons expert, right?
Yeah.
So she gets involved, and Cree lands a roundhouse kick on a guy just as he's about to get Johnny, and all of a sudden, okay, so now he's going, this girl is not only cute, but and she is smarter than he is. And she begins to detect that there's something about him she can't figure out. And he's a little worried because she seems to know more than she should.
Ooh.
And the secret, as it turns out, is that her brother was a Lycan. And so she understands what's going on, and she's the first person who Johnny has ever dealt with who understands this, at least to some degree.
Yeah.
And so she has a natural empathy for him. It's like, most women that like Johnny and probably me. It starts as a charity case. and hopefully grows into something else.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So she's kind of okay. So it starts out kind of. Do they start out like infatuation level, or is it just that they're
No, it
together?
starts out she knows there's something about him, so she's trying to figure it out. And one of the things that's fun about this is because Johnny has to be so careful with women.
Yeah.
You know, he's still traumatized. He almost killed his prom date.
Oh gosh.
I mean, proms and full moons are a bad combination
Yeah.
anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
there's enough bad stuff goes on prom night without that combination going on. And in the first book, you realize that while, you know, nothing happened ultimately, he's terrified that it will. And so he can't believe that anybody wants to be with him on any kind of permanent basis. And so Cree makes it clear pretty early on that she is interested. And, you know, it's not a head over heels fast thing. It's like it's a relatively slow burn. I mean, first of all, Cree being who she is, Johnny at first suspects that she's gay.
Yeah.
And I love the scene where she's sitting in the truck with him, and he finally she says something about, "Are you gay?" And he says, "No, I'm not. What about you?" And she says, "Believe it or not, I'm not." As she says, she dabbled enough to piss off the patriarchy, but ultimately she likes boys.
Yeah.
And there's this uncomfortable silence, and she goes, "Well, you could at least say yay or something."
So she's got a sense of humor too then.
She's wonderful. She's got a great sense of humor. And I'm not going to give it away, but she develops a very cool way to be with Johnny without Shaggy interfering.
Yeah.
And makes her case very clearly that she thinks this is an excellent idea. And Johnny requires a little convincing because, of course, he's mad about her by this point. And yet he's trying to be a responsible grown-up about the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, not just because he could like turn into a monster and eat her, but he's only in Vegas for 3 days. And you know, she's in Vegas, he's going back to Chicago.
Yeah.
He's trying to be cool about all of this and not totally succeeding. But there are a couple of things about that. She's not this perfect angelic woman. He's not the perfect fantasy figure. So, you know, I like that.
Yes.
I like the fact that it's not instant love and they don't know, and maybe it's driven by fate. No, it's messed up and messy and weird and complicated and like people are.
Yeah, it's realistic. I like that.
And yes, there's sex. So, you know, there's that too.
Steamy scenes.
You know, the problem, sex scenes for me are really uncomfortable to write because they say write what you know. And so, you know.
That is too funny. I like to tie humor, like a little bit of humor and like snarky humor into mine because sometimes it does get a little awkward writing it.
Oh, it's incredibly awkward.
Yes. But you want it to be like, I mean, it's somewhat realistic because you're not just going to be like silent, like snarky comments are going to come out, especially depending on the person. And Cree seems like she would make a snarky comment. So
Cree is relatively, it's funny, she has no confidence in herself. As so many women, she doesn't really understand how attractive she is because she feels very unattractive. And she desperately wants to be part of the covenant and learn more about her powers. And she keeps kind of being relegated to the witch version of making coffee. Like she's doing the potions and stuff, and she's brilliant at it. But she really wants to connect on a higher level with the spirits that drive the coven, and she's been stymied in that, and so she feels very self-effacing about her powers.
Yeah. So with that being mentioned, let's talk about her backstory. Where did she learn all of this? Was it passed down in her family?
Yeah. So if you've read the first book, as Maddie has, and if you haven't, what the hell's wrong with you? Johnny was, while he was raised in Chicago as a nice suburban Chicago boy, he was born in Romania. And was adopted in the late 80s when babies from Romania were a hot commodity because they were basically white and had very little paperwork associated with them. And so he vaguely remembers being in the orphanage in Romania, but not really. It's just flashes. Well, it turns out Cree's brother Thomas was adopted at about the same time from the same place. And she grew up, this is not really clearly stated in the book. This is all.
This is the backstory that
this is the backstory, and it's important on multiple levels.
Yeah.
She was raised on a farm in South Dakota, largely her and her brother, and a bunch of acres of wheat, right? So they were very tight. And something happens. And it's never made clear in the book, but something happened to Thomas because the reason she shows Johnny that she knows about this is she has one of his claws on her altar.
Wow.
And Johnny knows, of course, you don't just get a Lycan claw. It's not like, oops, I broke a nail, right?
Yeah.
Probably whoever was attached to that is dead. And so she explains that Thomas did in fact die. Now, if you've read the first book, you know that Johnny keeps referring to something that happened in Yankton, South Dakota, that he's never going back to Yankton, South Dakota. Thomas has an attachment to that incident.
Oh.
Which you don't find out in this book, but it's there.
Yeah.
And so Cree's knowledge and her support, and one of the things that Cree did as her little chemistry witchy things is she developed a potion which allowed Thomas to expel his Lycan side for short periods of time. And ultimately she gets Johnny to try it.
Ooh. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and so Cree, left the farm and went to university and then went to Las Vegas. And now she's doing the special effects and designs for Carmen's stage show. Using her skills.
Nice.
And in the meantime, she runs basically a potions shop out of her apartment. As Johnny says, if Martha Stewart ran a meth lab, this is what it would look like.
I love that phrasing because that is like the perfect thing that you could use for marketing and stuff. So Cree and Johnny, they build this relationship and everything. Does she continue to use her potion skills like towards the end of the book to help him? Does he take some of that back since he's...
I'm not giving away all of this stuff.
I have to ask because
I know you have to ask, but it's so funny. She is... Okay, so when I was writing my historical series set in the Crusades, my daughter told me after book one, it was meant to be a standalone, and I had written this lovely epilogue about what happens to the character years later. And my kid, the demon spawn, said to me, you can't end it like that. And if you do, when you're old, I will leave you in a home and ignore you.
Oh my gosh.
And this is relevant because A, she's evil, and so I can't depend on her in my old age. I got to write books. But the other thing is that she loved Cree.
Yeah.
And said, this person needs to stick around. And I suspect she doesn't play a major role in book 3. She's kind of there, but she's the kind of character I've already kind of got a Cree standalone kind of idea. So I don't know what's going to happen to her, but it'll be fun.
It's always fun when those ideas come in. They're like, here, pay attention to me right now. You're like, no, stay over here. Can't do
Yes,
this right
behave
now.
yourself. Behave
Like,
yourself.
wait your turn. I gotta finish this first. So she comes around. She's gonna stick around more.
It's possible. It's entirely possible.
Yes.
But
So, what was your least favorite thing to create in her character?
the kind of mean girl attitude in the coven.
Hmm.
I firmly believe that if God made anything nastier than a 14-year-old girl, he kept it to himself. And while these women aren't 14, we all know that the difference between adult life and junior high is about that much. The behavior is what it is. And women being mean to women always makes me cringe.
Yeah.
So that's hard. Plus, by this time, of course, I have developed this giant crush on her, and so anybody mean to her is like,
Hit him in the face. Get rid of him.
gotta
So
be
the
dealt
girl
with.
attitude. Did you find inspiration from like when your daughter went to school to put in there, or like how did you channel that energy into her character?
Not really. There are two things. I've been thinking about this because I knew you were
Mhm.
going to ask me this, and I there are two things that made up Cree.
Mhm.
One is a woman that I knew in my youth, who shall remain nameless. I had a crush on, and we almost got together at one point. And then I realized as I'm staring into her eyes that she's wearing a chain that has an ankh, a cross, a yin yang symbol, and and a Star of David all on this charm. And part of me went, she's either really indecisive or she needs all the help she can get, and I am not prepared to deal with that kind of crazy. And that image has always stuck with me. So Cree actually has all those symbols tattooed along her collarbone because it's no longer 1985. It's now, 2020, whatever the heck it is. And so she actually has all those symbols tattooed along her collarbone. And Johnny has that moment where he's like, pick a lane, lady. But the other thing that inspired her is I was at the gym. Shut up, I was at the gym on one of the machines, and I saw this woman out of the corner of my eye. And she was, young and very fit, but she had legs that could bench press a Buick. And she had spiky, punky kind of hair. And I just totally random thought went, oh, Johnny would totally dig her.
Nice. But that's how it happens sometimes when you get the
And then I went, oh, Johnny would totally dig her. And it's like I was dying to know her backstory.
Yeah.
But, this creepy old guy coming up to her on the gym going, you'd be great in my book, seemed like not a great move.
Yeah.
And so instead, as I watched her on the machines, trying desperately not to look pervy, I just made up a story for her. So I have no idea.
That is awesome.
I have no idea what this woman's deal is. I've never seen her there again. But those two things, it's like that physicality that just went, wow, that's great. And it was so uncommon for this type of book. Like you say, people tend to be very perfect and very CW.
Yes.
Everybody's very CW in urban fantasy.
And yeah.
But then this very damaged but sweet woman that I knew in my youth, I kind of combined them, and that's where Cree came from.
Yeah, and it kind of like those little things like that kind of help with the backstory too, because like you said, you pulled in some trauma into her backstory with losing her brother and everything, and we're gonna leave unnamed like how it really happened, because like I'm sure there's more trauma to it than just the little bit we've talked about.
Yeah, one of my great things is that I hope to end the series without ever explaining what happened in Yankton, South Dakota. Like I've just left little Easter eggs.
Yeah.
But in perfect world, people will be like, "What happened?" And I'm
Yes.
never going to tell them.
Oh man, you're gonna kill me. I'm already like, okay, we're gonna pay attention for these Easter eggs as we finish reading this story and get the next book. So, which I am totally like gonna snag the next book when it drops. So, yes.
Well, it drops December 8th, and it's on Kindle Unlimited. So if you're cheap, there is no excuse.
Yeah, because it's there. You can get it, guys. You can get it. So with the Johnny Lycan series and Cree and everything going in this world, you mentioned she's gonna have like her own spinoff. Will these two eventually like find a way to like be together?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think deep down underneath this cynical cishet white guy thing, I'm basically a romantic.
Yay.
I mean, Johnny deserves nice things. And unfortunately, this means bad things for Nurse Ball. I mean, there's another character that, Nurse Ball is a trip.
Yeah.
And of course, if Johnny is with Cree, and she's 20 years older than him. She's highly damaged goods, but she's a good time, and she's a decent person and doesn't deserve bad things happening to her.
Yeah.
Right. But there's obviously no long-term future.
Yeah.
With her and Johnny. But, if he winds up with this person, then he's not with her. And, there's trauma and drama and all of that stuff.
But that makes the story good. So
it does make a story good. Plus, Johnny needs an older woman. As somebody who married somebody 9.5 years older than me, that can have a fine effect on a young man, particularly one who hasn't got his caca together. And so, yeah, she's another one. It's funny. Johnny is the hero, and Johnny and Bill, and there are a couple other people, but I just love the female characters in this series. Granny and Megan, and all of which mean nothing to you if you haven't read the book. So,
that's true. So
catch up, people.
Yes, because they are some awesome characters. Like when you introduced Granny, like, yes, I instantly was like, yep, okay, I really like her already. Like just this little brief intro, and I'm like, yeah. So, but go ahead and tell our viewers where they can grab this series and where they can find you.
Yeah, Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker, darn it. It's from Black Rose Writing. You can certainly buy it from the publisher, but it's available in paperback. It's available almost anywhere. If you are a Kindle reader, you got to get through Amazon, right? But it is on Kindle Unlimited. And of course, the drill. If you read it, leave a review, darn it, especially in the first couple of weeks. That really, really matters. And I know it's pathetic that authors beg for reviews. It's so pathetic and sad. And yet it's true. And if you read it on Kindle, there is zero excuse not to, because it keeps popping up going, leave a review, you idiot. It's more work to ignore it.
Yes,
it's actually more work to ignore it than it is to just cave in.
Yeah.
But basically Amazon is where you'll find it. And I'm excited. And the first book, of course, Johnny Lycan and the Anubis Disc, is already out in the world and available. And, good Lord willing, the creek don't rise and I get it together. Johnny Lycan and The Last Witchfinder is coming eventually.
Yes.
But it is currently under construction.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on Character Driven.
Thank you for having me. This is a great idea.
Remember, it's always time to go indie now.
Wayne Turmel, and I'm reading a scene from Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker that contains the girl of the moment, Cree Jensen. This is fairly late in the book. Johnny is about to turn into a werewolf and go save the relic that he's sent to retrieve, and Cree is his wingman, so to speak. So here we go. What are you doing? The moon's not up yet. Cree looked pale and was white-knuckling the steering wheel. There are a couple of things I need to do before then. There was a follow-up question in her eyes. Fine, I have to stretch out, otherwise the change hurts like a bitch. So stretch, I'll stand guard. Hell, I could use a good stretch, I'll do it with you. How do I explain this one? I kind of need to do it naked. Her laugh filled the cab of the truck and then some. Okay, stretch naked, do what you gotta do. What are you, shy? And that's how I wound up standing in a hot sandy patch by the side of the road at dusk in just my boxer briefs. Bill had watched me stretch plenty of times, but never just before a change, and it felt oddly pleasant to share the moment with someone.